All right, guys, let's thank Ryan Reagan, Joe Marshart, JD King, and Sean Mackey, latest GoFundMe donors. Thank you guys very much. From now on, $5 or more contribution, you get a signed ibuprofen. There's only 800 of those made. And for $20 or more, you get a signed Wasting Talent book. For $40 or more, you get one of the signed blotter arts. They're limited to 800. There's only 800 of these, plus there's 10 artist proofs, which people have already gotten, or already paid for. I'm sending them out Thursday. And this is what they look like. So there's where the edition number is. It's hard to do. It's like doing it with a mirror. There's the edition. There's my signature. And that is what it looks like. It's been perforated just like a real acid sheet would come. And it was done, perforation and all that was done by Zane Kesey, which is Ken Kesey's son. Ken Kesey, of course, is one of the godfathers of LSD. Albert Hoffman invented it, but Timothy Leary and Ken Kesey, Ken Kesey ran the Merry Pranksters, and they were really largely responsible for the big acid wave of the 1960s. Huge 60s luminaries. Super cool that his son was the one that perforated and got the blotter together. Pretty cool collectible. I'm excited about them, and I spent all day numbering them, signing them, and I got all the books. I got a box of 100 books. If you've been waiting on them for raffle or if you've paid for them, Thursday's the day. That's the day I'm going to take them to the post office and ship them all out. I'll also have the tracking, which I can give you if needed. And I've been working on the album, Drug Stories for Truckers Volume 1. It will be coming out on Thanksgiving. That's the release date. And it's going to be amazing. I've been working my ass off on it. I got a bunch of badass guest appearances, druggy luminaries. I got Chong on it from Cheech and Chong. Got Freeway Ricky Ross, so I'm going to be with all day tomorrow. We're going to do some stuff at a production studio. Boston George from Blow is going to be on, a bunch of actors. Some rappers are going to be on it, and I'll post a little advertisement and you'll see who all the guest appearances. But I'm really excited about that. And then another thing, this is funny. I get this one all the time. People go, "You're not a bestseller. Ooh, just because you say you are, you're not. Ooh, ooh." Well, this is the January-February issue of Penthouse magazine from 2018, right? Hold on. What does it say on the cover? It says right there, from ex-con to bestseller, The Tortured Life of Ryan Leone. And they did a pretty big article on me. The Tortured Life of an Outlaw Author, Writer, whatever. And, there's pictures of me and my baby mama. And yeah, so they said that, Huffington Post, bunch of magazines and newspapers. Stop talking shit. Stop trying to discredit me. If you don't like my stuff, just don't watch, you fucking loser trolls. It's like, get a life, dude. The same people that talk shit comment on almost every video. So, stop hating. Bad look. You just look stupid. You have acne. Ooh. Yeah, so what? I've had acne since I was 12. I wasn't smoking crack or doing heroin back then. So, like, get a life, dude. I'm on Suboxone. That's why my eyes are pinned. And I have acne just because I have acne. I still have a beautiful fiance. I bet it's better than you with your no profile picture. Ooh, sound like an idiot. Stop it. So sorry for the long introduction. Just want to bring you up to date on some of the new stuff going on. So this is my 5 years in federal prison, part 22. And where we had left off last time, I just gotten kicked out of the drug program. And I was heartbroken. I was devastated. And that was the catalyst for me just not giving a fuck. I just didn't care anymore. What more could you do to me? I hardly had any good time left to take. And I was upset that they had taken my ear, almost arbitrarily for a really petty reason. Just because I didn't want to live with a child molester. And I swear, just to punish me, they gave me like a string of bad cellies. I don't remember what the first one I lived with's name was, but he was some redneck. And he's like, let's lay down some ground rules. You will clean the cell twice a day. Twice a day? Jesus. And, I don't care what you do. You got vices, I got vices. Me, I fuck men. I fuck punks. So what? Been in prison for a while. Sometimes they fuck me. Sometimes I fuck two men at the same time. I've been down a long time. I'm like, how long you been down? How long you been in prison, man? 7 months this time, but I don't fuck dudes on the street. I ain't no gay, nothing like that. Like, Jesus Christ, I'm living this OCD like weirdo. I was like, well, listen, I don't fuck guys. He's like, yeah, me neither. Only when I'm in prison. So I like went to the counselor. I was like, I can't be in there anymore. I gotta go somewhere else. Counselor's like, okay, can you live with a Mexican? I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's not California, you can cell up with paisas. In California, you can cell up with Southsiders, but you can't cell up with paisas. It's against the politics. But in Wisconsin, you can cell up with whoever you want. So he put me in with this paisa that didn't speak English. And this paisa had like Tourette's or something. I don't know what he had, but people were like, oh man, you're going to have quite a time when you're with this guy. And just randomly he'd start saying like Spanish hymns, like all random, right? And I remember the first night, like at like 4 a.m, I wake up and he's like, and he's like pacing saying this, and I'm just like, oh my god, I'd rather live with the guy that would be like, yeah, I fuck men, and like I'd be talking to him, he's like, shh, I gotta read the Bible, shut up. Oh my god, I couldn't live with that guy. And now I'm with this Tourette's paisa guy. And like, I don't know a lot of Spanish at this point. My fiance's Mexican, and I've learned a lot more Spanish from her. But like back then, I really only knew some slang, and I knew Simon, which was like, means yeah. It's like slang, and I think yeah in Spanish, slang or something. So he'd be like I lived with the guy for like 2 weeks too. He'd be like, and I'd be like, Simon. And then he'd just like look at me and he'd be like, Simon. I'm like, oh my god. Like, I don't know what he thought I was saying, but I thought I was just saying yeah. It was like really the only word I know. But like he'd stop his hymns and I'd be like, Simon. And he'd be like, Simon. I'm like, oh shit. So this guy was freaking me out. So I had to move again. And I think the counselor was just fucking with me just because they were mad at me. And so he like tried to put me with like the worst cellies as possible. Finally put me with this guy. I forget what his name was. I was in the cell with him for a couple months, but I don't remember what his name was. But we were friends when he was living in Colombia with me, which is the drug program unit. And what had happened is one time we wrestled. Right? So a lot of people wrestle in prison, and I never really try to horseplay because if it goes wrong, it can make things awkward because everything's on this facade of the bravado and everything. So like it's, if things accidentally get carried away and you get in a real fight, it can be bad. And that had happened with this his name was Brian, and this had happened with Brian. We had wrestled one time just messing around, and like he'd always want to wrestle me and I wouldn't want to wrestle, and we were wrestling one time and things got a little carried away, and like it turned into kind of like a real fight, and then things were awkward between us from that point forward. And it kind of like killed our friendship, but they moved me in with this guy. And remember, I told you I never saw drugs at Oxford. It was very hush-hush. And the first night that I was living with Brian, he's like, hey, do you want to get stoned? I was like, stoned? He's like, yeah. You want to smoke herb? And like I said, I mean, like our relationship had like a strain on it from that time we had wrestled. He definitely like didn't like me, but he offered me weed like the first night I was in a cell with him. And it was the first time I'd smoked since I'd been there. And the way that they were doing it at Oxford was pretty ingenious. They would roll like a little stick with like Bible paper. So Bible paper, you can like roll it up, and it's pretty thin paper. It's thinner than like normal paper, and they give you these free little pocket Bibles, and they're like perfect for rolling. And then you get an envelope and you lick the glue that you'd use to seal an envelope. And then so you roll the Bible paper, and then you lick an envelope and lick the joint, the stick. And, I'd been to prisons where you'd roll a stick and then you'd smoke it just like that. But at Oxford, they did it like a way more low-key way. They'd roll it up in a stick, and then they would cut the stick into little chunks like this big. Get a metallic pen, and they had this wire contraption that I'd seen at Victorville. They had them too. It's like a wire that guys would make in like the factories at the factory jobs, and it was like 2 pieces of wire, and it had like a coil at the end of it, and you could put like attach it to a battery. The coil would get red hot, so you could like light a cigarette with it. What we would do is we would cut this stick into little chunks, put the metallic pen, in our mouth, and you would use the coil. You'd like use the battery and coil to light the little chunk, and then you'd use the metallic pen to like take a hit, and you just watch it slowly burn, and the whole thing would just disappear because you'd smoke it. And then you'd get a towel, and you'd fold it up, and you'd blow you'd hold the smoke in for as long as you could, and then you'd blow what little remains were left into this towel. And the towel, we'd like put shampoo or conditioner on, something fragrant, and it wouldn't smell at all. It was like really perfect. Like we would smoke all the time in there, and we never got caught. Cops never smelled it. And that's why I didn't even know there were drugs at Oxford. Everyone that was doing drugs was doing them really slick like that. So Brian and I, even though he didn't like me, he'd smoke me out, and then I started buying it too. And I forget what the pricing was there, but it was more expensive than in California, and the weed was definitely shittier. It was like all coming in from Chicago, and it was like mid-grade commercial bud, like that just, it's not like the kind of stuff you get on the West Coast at all. It's just really shitty weed. And I know there's better weed in the Midwest, on the East Coast, but there's also this like mid-grade stuff that you can't eat. Like honestly, you couldn't even get that in California. I don't even know where to get weed like that. So we would smoke a lot. And smoking weed has never been my thing. I've talked about it before. It makes me insecure, especially in social situations. And it's interesting in prison when you smoke weed because your perception changes. So you start thinking about how weird some of these people are. Doing time with the same people day in, day out, you really forget how bizarre some of them are. I'd like, now that I was smoking weed, I was like introduced to this whole underworld of other guys that were smoking weed at Oxford on the DL. Taco was one of them. And like, I'd smoke weed with him, and I'd realize how weird he was. It's like you start thinking about it, you're like, God, I would never hang out with this guy in the free world. Taco would like take his little hit with the wire and be like, you feel it yet? I'm like, dude, yeah, it's weed. Remember the time we got in the riot? Tell Brian about the riot. I'm like, we weren't in a fucking riot, Taco. We were in a cell watching a riot go down outside. We were like in the safety of our cell. He's like, yeah. But what if they came in the cell? I'm like, they had nothing to do with us, you weird ass dude. Or I'd start just, like anybody that even Brian, like just, you're with weird people. And like the more time you do, the less you think about it. But when you get stoned, it almost amplifies your perceptions, or at least shifts the vantage point in a way where you start tripping out on people around you. So I smoked a lot of weed in the beginning there. And, I was essentially the porn king of Oxford at this point. I was making a lot of money selling these little black and white booklets of porn. And I'd get them printed, I'd staple them, 20 pages, selling them for $5, or a book of stamps. Book of stamps broken up was currency there, and I'd get $5 for every porn book that I sold. It cost me $1.50 to get them copied from this guy that worked in he worked for like the staff in the education department. And I would, go to the weight pile, and I'd have all this porn, like I'd have like 10 different books rolled up, and I'd just meet people, and I'd be slanging porn. And that was kind of my thing. And I'd use the money that I made to smoke weed. To smoke weed, to put in with Brian. And we were really into pizzas back then. They sold these little pizza kits for like $4 off commissary. Came with the crust, and we get a thing of mozzarella, and we grind it up with like a makeshift cheese shredder. and then you could buy pepperoni, and we made these pizzas. So we get stoned. American Horror Story had just come out, so we get stoned, watch that, and eat pizza. It wasn't that bad. That was Dane. I was still very upset that I got kicked out of the drug program and I was no longer in that Columbia unit anymore. But aside from that, I had accepted the fact that I was doing an extra year of my sentence, and then I started getting in trouble. I stopped being as low-key about stuff that I was doing. I got caught making Pruno. I was making wine. At Oxford, they had these, the best hiding place ever. They had this vent underneath the desk area. And certain, plumbing crew, had tools. They'd come in and, fix stuff in the bathroom, and I'd just pay them, be like, hey, I'll give you a couple porn books if you come over and open my vent. So they had the little screwdriver. They're very, hardcore about their tools. There's a tool inventory, and they make sure every day that the tools are returned and everything's where it's supposed to be so that nobody's escaping. But these guys would come open my vent, and there was a little, it would go down, and it would kind of make a little L. And I could get a batch of wine and put it down there, and it was perfect. It would hide under this vent, and that went on for a few months where I never got caught. But one day, I guess they smelled it, because it does smell, and they randomly shake down your cell, and they knew that something was down there, and they called somebody, a lieutenant, and the lieutenant got in there somehow. I think he probably got one of the screwdriver tools, because he could smell it too, and I got caught with wine. I went to the hole for a week. Maybe longer, maybe a week or two, I don't remember. But, then you go to the disciplinary hearing, and they took 2 weeks or 3 weeks, a good time for me for making wine. Every time you go to the hole, you lose your material stuff, and you change cellies. So I was no longer with Brian. I don't remember who I was with when I came out that time. But this started a era for me where I was moving cells very frequently. I got caught making the wine. I had to go to the hole. Another time I was jerking off, per usual. And when I was jerking off at this point, it used to be the black and white porn. Now I had color magazines, and I made it very ritualistic. I'd I'd put the towel over my door, and then I'd have all my different porn spread out, and I have my little, coconut butter, and it's this whole perverted masturbation station, right? And once in a while you hear keys, you hear them, if a cop's walking, people go walking. That's in any prison. That's a universal prisoner jail thing. You hear walking. Or sometimes they have code words, radio, channel check, shit like that. And then the cop's walking. And cops have the COs have such a big key ring, because they have to lock these doors manually. Remember, at Oxford, they didn't have bathrooms inside the cell, so the only time that you were ever actually locked in it was during the 4 o'clock stand-up count, so that the count could get interrupted. And so they have to have this big key ring to open the cells and to open other doors and whatever. So you can hear COs walking, their keys jangle, right? And one day I was masturbating, and I hear keys. And so I had to take down my little station, and I go take down the towel, and I look in the hall, and there's no CO. And I'm like, what? I'm hearing shit. So I go back, put the towel back up, take out my coconut butter, put my porn, and I hear the keys again. And I'm like, take everything down, I go look out. No CO. And so I go back in my cell, and I put the towel back up to pretend like I'm going to do it again, but I can... I'm under I kind of know someone's fucking with me. So I kind of just stay by the door, and I wait to hear the keys go by my cell, and I open it, and I see this Norteño guy. His name was Ghost. And he sees me, and he just starts laughing. And I was so mad. I just start talking shit to him. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? You're going to act like a cop? I've been down for 2.5 years now, and I'm way more aggro than I used to be, and I'm way more flagrant and reckless. And so I start talking bad to this guy, and we start fighting. It was a pretty even fight. I threw the first one, but he hit me back, and He's a better fighter than me, and it's like an even fight, and we fought until we got caught. So I went to the hole again. So now I've been to the hole, like, you know, I went for the wine, and then I go again for fighting. For the fighting, they take a full month off my sentence. I lose a whole month of good time. I think I went to the hole for like 2 or 3 weeks that time. And instead of me going back to that unit, Dane, now they're like putting me on what's called like internal diesel therapy. Now, if you're a really problematic inmate, they put you on what's called diesel therapy, and they basically just put you on a bus and drive you all around the country, and you do layovers at different prisons, but you never go to a destination. I don't know how that's legal, but I know they still do it to certain people, especially high-profile people. Like, you're basically those hellacious travel days that I was telling you about in a few videos ago. You basically have to do that. You get on Con Air, then you get on a bus, and then you go do a layover at Victorville, and then you pack up, and then you go to another place, and you go to another place. It's called diesel therapy. Sometimes they put people on that for 2 years. They do it for either high profile or if you're like really misbehaved. But they kind of put me on this thing called internal diesel therapy at Oxford, where they were moving me around different units all the time, just to fuck with me. You know, they'd put me in a unit for a week, and then I'd be on the chain sheet to go move to another unit. And so I was basically living out of laundry bags, the equivalent of living out of suitcases. And they did that to me like 5 or 6 times, where I'd go to different units, and it was really inconvenient because I could never get settled. I got caught beating off at one of my cells. I was on the top bunk, and I was trying to get it at like 3 in the morning on the top bunk, and this like fat guy that I was living with was like, "Hey!" And he like kicked the bunk. He's like, "Hey, I can hear you up there, you little fucking weirdo." I'm like, oh my God. I wasn't masturbating. He's like, "Dude, save that shit." I'm like, oh God. And of course the next day at breakfast, everyone's like, Leone's such a weirdo, got caught beating off by this old trucker guy. I'm like, fuck. So finally they moved me into what's called Woodhouse. And Woodhouse is I had told you guys about that. That's where the thing with Sandman had gone down. It's the only unit in Oxford that has bathrooms in the cell, and the cells lock at night. And it's a weird unit. I don't know what the purpose of it. I've heard it's called a disciplinary unit or a hideout unit. You're basically, and there's like 12, no, more than that, probably like 24 guys living in this place. And some of the guys that were in there are people that I had never seen before. You know, it's like people I'd never even seen. They've like just live in this weird unit. never really leave the unit to go eat or anything. There's a lot of people like that in federal prison. They have so much money, they just go to commissary and then they just make themselves food. They don't want to go eat the shitty food that the feds provide, even though the food that they gave us at Oxford was pretty good. So I'm in this unit, and the guys in there are pretty weird, you know? I'm still buying weed, and I didn't have the little wire set up. And at this place, what I would do is I just roll up a joint and I go smoke it in the group shower. I was like the only one at this unit that smoked weed for the most part. And so I just go in the group shower and I'd smoke by myself, you know? And one time I was smoking in there, and I'd become pretty good friends with this guy named Brian Marks. We always watched CNN together, and we'd always like talk politics, and he seemed like a normal enough guy. He was all tatted up. He didn't seem like a weirdo. And so I'm in the shower, and I'm smoking a joint. I'm crouched down. Of course, I have one hand over my small dick. I'm the only one in there, but of course I'm hiding my little wiener. I'm smoking a joint, just kind of like looking around, hoping I don't get caught by the COs. And this guy Brian comes in there. He's like, "Hey man, can I hit that joint?" And I was like, "Sure." So we're like both crouched down naked, passing this Bible paper joint back and forth. And so I smoke with him, and he's like, "Hey, cruise by my cell after shower. I'm like, let's chop it up." He's like, "Thanks for smoking me out." And I'm like, "All right, cool." So I go to his cell, and we're kind of just, talking and stuff, and he's telling me about this band that he plays in. He's like, yeah, man, I'm in a band. So you can have bands in federal prison, and like on special holidays like 4th of July, they'll put on little concerts like out on the yard. And he's telling me about this band he's in. He's like, yeah, like I'm the drummer, and then the lead singer is this guy named Harry Potter. This little weird guy. I didn't really know him, but I had heard of him and I'd seen him around. He looked just like Harry Potter. And coincidentally, the next day, so he tells me about this guy, that he's in this band with this guy Harry Potter. The next day, we go to chow, and we're, sitting there, and all of a sudden you see all the cops run. Remember, when they hit the walkie-talkie, that's called hitting the deuces in the feds. And they hit, like, if something's going down, like a fight, a riot, sex riot, whatever the case, they hit the radio, and it kind of, like, it must tell all the other COs what direction to run into. And so we're eating, and you don't see that much at Oxford. It's a relatively timid place compared to, like, Victorville or Beaumont or some of these crazier FCIs. So we see all the COs running in direction. Now remember, at Oxford, there's up the hill and there's down the hill. I was living down the hill at a place called Woodhouse at the time, and they're running down the hill. So we're all in the chow hall, and we kind of all get up, and we're looking out these big windows, because there's big windows, and then there's like a courtyard that you can look into from the chow hall. So we see all these COs running, and like we're at chow, and they're running down the hill. So we're wondering what that's about, because everyone that lives down the hill is at chow. Now, some people, like I said, eat, in their cell and just eat commissary stuff, don't go to chow, but there's not that many people like that. So they run, and then we don't see anything, and we're all kind of just looking, and some of the COs in the chow are like, hey, get back to work, get back to eating, get back to work, get back to eating, get back to your table, rah, 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 rah. I'm like, all right, whatever. So we go back to our tables, and you see a bunch of COs start walking up, and there's maybe 10 of them. They're walking up the hill, and they have a gurney. And I'll never forget this. It was absolutely crazy. We saw this. We saw on the gurney that there was an inmate, and he had his arm draped out of the gurney, and he had a piece of sheet wrapped around his neck, and he was completely pallid and bluish, like almost like a fish tone of blue, dead, and he'd obviously hanged himself. And I remember seeing it was super creepy. Like, you just see him like laying there, and he's got this sheet. You couldn't tell who it was though, but from like getting up and looking, even though the COs were like, we were like still, could see. I mean, you could literally see this like deathly, color tone on his body from where we were, but we couldn't recognize who he was. Next day, we find out that it was Harry Potter, the guy that this guy was just telling me about. This guy Brian Marks was just telling me about, and he, so that this is the following day now. Same thing. I'm smoking a joint in the shower. Brian comes up. He's like, hey, man, can I hit that? And I'm like, yeah. We're crouching down naked. Just two guys smoking a joint naked in the shower. No biggie. And same thing, I go back to his cell. And I'm like, man, that guy Harry Potter. Now, we had all found out what had happened and why he killed himself. He had told his family that he was doing like 25 years for some sort of marijuana thing. But he was really in there for child pornography. Child pornography is ubiquitous in the federal system. It's a federal charge. Secret Service is in charge of enforcing that. Or maybe it's one of those agencies is in charge of kiddie porn. And what had happened is he was like a kiddie porn producer, and he was doing 25 years for it. So sex offenders get disproportionately small sentences compared to drug offenders. I've always thought that that was just bullshit, right? You see a lot of guys in federal prison doing life sentences for drugs. You rarely see pedophiles get long sentences for pedophile stuff. 2 years, 3 years. If 10 years or worse, you have to be pretty bad. And so I guess this guy was like a big kiddie porn producer. And he had gone to visit, and his parents had basically said, "We found out that you're in here for producing kiddie porn. You're cut off, and I hope you fucking burn in hell. You have no support from us anymore. You're a piece of shit." And they were talking loud enough where other people in the visit had heard them. And, like they had gotten up and just stormed out. Fucking chomo. And so he'd gone back to his cell after the visit. I think he killed himself the next day, and he hanged himself, and he killed himself. So I'm in Brian Mark's cell right after we smoked a joint, and I'm like, damn, Harry Potter killed himself. I didn't even know the guy. I was like, that's ironic. You were just telling me about him yesterday. He ends up killing himself for being a pedophile. I said, that's a W for us, huh? And Brian looks at me and he's like, "Hey, man, that's a human being, man." I'm like, that's not a human being. That is not a human being. If you're attracted to children, you're a creature. You're a monster. Especially if you act on it, I mean, I guess nobody can help what they're attracted to, but you start producing kiddie porn, you are a monster and you deserve to die. Straight up. I mean, that's the lowest of the low, right? And he's like, he was a person and I miss him, man. I'm like, what the fuck? Instantly a red flag goes up, I mean, I'm just like, I storm out of his cell. I'm just like, dude, I don't even want to talk to you. Like, how are you backing up a pedophile? How good of friends could you been with this guy? You played in a federal prison band with him, and he's a pedophile. That should trump the fact that you guys were friends. If I found out about somebody, I definitely wouldn't be friends with them anymore. And it had put up a red flag for sure. I ended up getting out of Oxford, like a year or two after that. And I remember I was working for my dad's company, basically doing data entry work for him. And so I did a lot of Google searches and Facebook and, shit that you do when you're supposed to be working, but you're just on your computer doing whatever. And I remember I looked up his name, Brian Marks, spelled Bryan. And last name was Marks. He's from Michigan. I usually don't give people's government names out, but in this case, I will. His name was Brian Marks from Michigan. And I had Googled him, and I found his case. His case was online. Some sort of appellate thing about him. And he was just like Harry Potter. But this guy was basically kidnapping kids and bringing them to his parents' basement in Michigan and making them do sex acts or whatever kiddie porn producers do. And he was distributing this stuff internationally. And he had told me, I'd asked him before. I mean, he wasn't like a good friend of mine, and you couldn't really demand to see people's paperwork at Oxford. Like at Victorville, it's a prerequisite. You have to show paperwork. But at Oxford, it's the kind of thing where, just like when I had asked to see that guy that had gotten me kicked out of the drug program, look what happened to me. And it was the kind of thing where if I said it again, I was definitely going to, if I got caught doing that, if someone brought it to the staff's attention again, I would have been transferred or whatever. And this place was cool. It had a weight pile. I had it very good there. I was a porn king of Oxford. So, I wasn't going around checking people's paperwork. This guy wasn't in my immediate circle. But I'd asked him when we first started talking, I said, "What are you in prison for?" Because I was just curious because he didn't have he wasn't like a big druggie. He didn't have like that. He didn't really carry himself like a convict. I mean, he was blasted. He had a bunch of tattoos, but that doesn't mean shit. You can have a bunch of tattoos and just be a lame with a paint job. you know, and you see that a lot in prison. People hide behind the tattoos. But he had told me fraud. I'm like, how much time did you get? He's like, 15 years. I'm like, Jesus, that must have been some pretty bad fraud. He's like, yeah, it wasn't worth it, man. Come to find out that he was a kiddie porn producer. And, you know, it's like, I remember reading that when I was, you know, years later when I'd gotten out. And I remember how creeped out I felt about it. And I was still in contact with people from prison on Core Links, and I immediately sent that information in there. I was like, hey, this guy Brian Marks, and they had said, yeah, we found out about it. And they had gotten him. They had already smashed him out. You know, even though that yard, people wore blinders and people wanted to go home and get the year off because of the drug program, if people were outed as sex offenders, people would still get them there. Just like what happened with that Native American that got beat up really bad. And I guess they had gotten Brian. And what they had said in the email, in kind of code language, was that a CO had put this guy out there. COs do that a lot, you know? I mean, not all COs are bad. The vast majority are. But some of them have principles. And, I mean, who likes a child molester? So this guy had gotten beat up. He got his ass handed to him. Doesn't make up for all the lives that I'm sure this kid ruined. But just interesting that I was actually around people like that. There's no protective custody in the feds. They just kind of throw everyone together like that. And especially at like a soft medium security yard like this was considered a soft one because of the drug program, because of the weight pile. Seems like the nicer amenities they have at these places, you know, the softer they are, because people don't want to leave. I didn't want to leave. You know, that was my whole incentive for not going around checking people's paperwork and staying in my lane to some degree, even though now I was like a troublemaker there, or that's what they considered. And I never knew that this guy was a child molester when I was there. Like I said, red flags had definitely come up, and especially when he was being like, yeah, man, Harry Potter, he's a human too. So anyway, we will get into my continued downward spiral, and my first, my first time that I ever did anything sexual with a female CO will be on the next episode of my 5 years in federal prison, part 23. Thank you guys for watching. Hit like, subscribe, comment, share with a friend. Palabra.